visit newnordicusa.com. Available as a tablet or delicious sugar-free gummy. Protect and help your liver the easy and effective way with Active Liver at Amazon or newnordicusa.com.
A look at the news, views, politics, sports, and people that are shaping Rutherford County. Listen each weekday morning at 9 o'clock for the Roundtable here on News Radio WGNS. The Good Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and online at WGNSradio.com. This is the Roundtable. A look at the news, views, politics, and people that are shaping Rutherford County.
Well, good morning on this Wednesday. Welcome into the Roundtable here on WGNS. Chip Walters with you from Exit Realty, Bob Lamb & Associates, and the Blue Raider Network. And always good to be in on a beautiful morning. It is not as warm outside as it looks, so just be prepared for that. And after a kind of a yucky morning yesterday, we're off and doing pretty well this morning. Our guest today is somebody I've been wanting to have on for a while, and it seems like every week I say that, but I've got a list of folks that I've wanted to have on, and one of the best storytellers we've ever seen come through the Mid-State, and that is Terry Bulger, the longtime feature reporter from Channel 4, WSMV. And Terry, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Chip.
Good deal.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Good. Appreciate you taking the time and spending some time with us this morning. I guess, all good stories start from the start, I guess. And in Terry's story, it was he and I were talking the other day about coming on the show and talking about his days. And I think it just came down to asking about your email address, actually, and and everybody's has a little something in there, and yours, one of your giveaways in your email address is that you're from Chicago and growing up on the south side of Chicago. Kind of tell me what life was like for you growing up in Chicago, and what I'm guessing was in the 60s and 70s.
That's correct. I grew up with four brothers, so my life was full of sports. Definitely watching sports and playing sports. That included baseball, football, hockey. I guess those were the big three. We played basketball too, but that was about it. A lot of times you'd play at the park. A lot of times you'd play outside in the street. And in the wintertime, they would come out with hoses and they'd freeze the lakes, freeze the grass, just pour water on it. It would freeze, and that's where we'd ice skate and play hockey.
Wow.
So we didn't have big arenas or anything like that, but it was still a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Being growing up on the south side, were you a White Sox fan?
I was a White Sox fan growing up, but honestly, when I was really young, I was a Cincinnati Reds fan because they were always winning, and the White Sox were not. So I kind of hopped on that bandwagon. Plus, I was a catcher in baseball, so I loved Johnny Bench. So that made me a Cincinnati Red fan. Later in life, I became a vendor at both parks, Wrigley Field and Comiskey, which kind of felt like it allowed me to be a Cub fan because I was working there.
What were you selling?
I sold at Comiskey Park because I wasn't quite 21 yet. At Comiskey, I sold Coke, Coca-Colas, and peanuts. And at Wrigley, when I started, I would sell peanuts. Again, you kind of start low and work your way up. As I got a little bit older, like 19, they put me on hot dogs in the upper deck. Which was a great thing back then, because if people can remember Wrigley Field in the mid-'80s, they didn't have concession stands in the upper deck. So if you were hungry, you either had to go down, all the way down to the first level, which most people didn't want to do, or buy them from me or 7 other hot dog vendors. And being Chicago, everything was unionized, so we would make 20% of everything we sold which was 20% of a hot dog, which added up to a very good day where you could make, in a 3-hour workday, maybe $80. And that was good money back then
Oh,
for
wow.
a kid just in college.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
and it was the top vending job always beer, or what was?
I would say beer, but hot dogs was a good one too,
Yeah.
because you had to be 21 to buy a beer. If you came as a family of 4, everybody ate a hot dog at the
Right.
ballpark. So there was an advantage to hot dogs. The beer guys did well always, but the hot dog guy, especially in the upper deck, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
that was a good job too, and that was at Wrigley Field. I never sold hot dogs at Comiskey Park, but yeah, that was a good job.
Yeah.
The only problem at Comiskey with Coke, the Cokes would leak onto your legs, and that wasn't really fun because sugar and your legs don't really mix very well.
It's funny. A couple of things you mentioned bring back memories to me, because my favorite team growing up, when I was old enough to kind of be a fan, was the Reds, the Big Red Machine of the mid '70s, and
Sure.
and fortunately, within the last 12 months, I've had the opportunity to meet Pete Rose and Johnny Bench, and also Dale Murphy, who a few years later was 2-time MVP for the Braves. But meeting Johnny Bench, I could when I was there shaking his hand, I could see my dad smiling down from heaven, because he thought Johnny Bench was just the best. But one of the great thrills I ever had going to a baseball game was a Friday afternoon, September, probably 20 years ago, walking in on just an absolutely beautiful September afternoon, walking into Wrigley Field for the first time, coming up the ramp and grabbing a brat and an old style and watching this will tell you how long ago it was. They were playing the Expos. So watching the Cubs and Expos do that. But another great thrill at Wrigley was, I don't know if you remember Jason Maxwell, who is now the baseball coach and new athletic director at Ensworth in Nashville. He played baseball at MTSU and is from Lewisburg. But we were up there on another trip and just happened – we planned this date. Again, it was a Friday. It was an MTSU football trip. We were going to play Illinois. So we flew into Chicago on a Friday to go see, and we were going to go see the Cubs. And it just so happened that it was in the middle of the Sosa-McGuire deal. And early in the game, Sammy Sosa hit number 59. And so that was great. And we knew that Jason had just been called up from Iowa. And so we're sitting there, and all of a sudden in the 7th inning, your attention please, and pinch hitting for the Cubs, Jason Maxwell. And not only did we get to see guys who knew him, not only did we get to see him get his first big league hit, it was a home run over the ivy in left center. And so really one of the great memories, because I had a personal tie to it. But it happened there at Wrigley, which was one of the all-time thrills to go to that ballpark.
That is fantastic. Yeah. Imagine that your first at bat and you hit a home run.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned coming up the ramp. Every day I would come up that ramp and see that field, and it was every day spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a sight to behold, to see the field, to see the big scoreboard in center field. To this day, they still have that scoreboard. They've updated some things. It's a little bit different, but for the most part, to see that green grass and the scoreboard, it never got old.
No, especially when it's sitting right there in the middle of such a huge city. After you got out of high school and decided to go to college, you went to Mizzou. Obviously, terrific journalism school. And where did the fire for telling stories come from? Being a storyteller, was it there? Was it growing up watching Charles Kuralt, or where was the inspiration?
Well, it's great that you mentioned Charles Kuralt because probably, if people don't know, he was an old CBS reporter, and he was kind of one of the first guys that just kind of went outside and rambled, just kind of went off on his own looking for stories and found them and just started telling them on the CBS Evening News. So he was definitely an inspiration. I said, wow, that looks cool. That's fun. I never really thought that I would do it for a living, but yeah, went to University of Missouri and worked in a couple of smaller towns before I came to Nashville and was kind of doing television because that's what I learned at college, got a Bachelor of Journalism, and mostly focused on broadcasting. But I was doing like lead stories and, murders. And I didn't really enjoy it because I felt like all day long, all I was doing was bothering people. And, some people deserve to be bothered, but a lot didn't. So I did it for a couple of years and then got the opportunity to come to Nashville.
Yeah.
And it all changed.
Now, when you, who hired you? Who was the news director when you got hired at Channel 4?
That was Alan Griggs, who I just talked to the other day. He's doing great, and he teaches over at Lipscomb.
Ah, good, because you came to Nashville. When did you come to Channel 4? What year was that?
1990.
1990. That's right. Because Alan, when I interned for Rudy, and Rudy was in the sports office at the time. Charlie Mack was there. Joe Fisher was working there.
Joe Fisher, definitely.
Yep. And Bob Selwyn was the news director when I was an intern. But then when my intern time was over, they asked me if I wanted to stay on and, work weekends and run around with John Wilson and go, do fun stuff like that. And of course, at the time, it was the absolute gold standard because I can remember I was a mass comm student at Middle. And in those days, if you were a wannabe TV person or broadcast person, you looked for those internships in the summer. Well, at the time, Channel 4's standing was such that they did not have to pay interns. They just had a never-ending supply. And so everybody wanted the unpaid internship at Channel 4 at the time, as opposed to internships at the other places where you actually got paid a little bit. But to be in a newsroom in those days that, again, Bob Selwyn was the news director. Fulbright was there. Travis was there. All of those great,
Mm-hmm.
grinding reporters, and you learned so much. And that was the time when, of course, Dan was there. Lonnie Lardner had been there. She was leaving. Demetria was coming in. So it was a really golden time. And you were part of that wave that got there in 1990.
Well, like you said, it was quite a impressive Mount Rushmore of reporters. And when I got there, I remember for the first 3 months, I was invisible as far as, being a reporter. There's like, who's this guy over here doing these feature stories when we're doing like serious news, which they were.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it was the Gulf War. I did a couple of stories that were local on the Gulf War and its connection to Nashville. And so people saw him and said, whoa, interesting. That's a good story. Who is this guy? He might be worthwhile after all. So it was kind of a slow ride into things, but eventually everybody kind of accepted me, which was good.
Yep. Now, when you got hired, was it specifically to be a feature reporter, or were you going to be a general assignment reporter and it kind of morphed into that?
Yes, that's a great question. In fact, Alan Griggs and I talked about that about a week ago. He remembered. He offered me a job as a feature reporter because he had seen I worked before Nashville in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I had done some kind of weird, fun story on a farmer who somehow lost his pigs. And I don't even kind of remember the specifics of the story, but it caught his eye. And so he said, we would like you to do those kind of stories at the end of the 10 o'clock newscast. And I was like, what? I mean, I've always been like a regular reporter, just doing regular news and stuff. And I thought, feature reporter, I don't even really know what that is. And I thought I'd be out of stories in 2 weeks. There's no way I can come up with those kind of stories a couple times a week. And he said, well, hold on here. Don't give up on me yet. There is a general assignment reporter opening as well. We'd love to offer you that if you'd prefer that. And I thought about it. I went back to Cedar Rapids and thought about it and thought, geez, a regular reporter, I would have to cover all the bleak news of the murders and crime and court cases and things like that. A feature reporter, if I did a story on a guy who played the fiddle, I just have to ask him, so how long you been playing the fiddle? And it seemed like, well, I could do that. And as time went on, I discovered there were a lot more stories out there than what I thought would be 3 weeks. And it wound up turning into 33 years.
Wow. You talk about, you mentioned earlier that you didn't like bothering people, and
Right.
and I get that because there was a time in my life when I thought about that, but it's like I don't want to pile on to some of these people who are going through one of the worst days that they're having, and that was probably one of the reasons that the dream of doing things in the sports world were probably tugging at that too. But
You're right. And, I think initially I thought of sports as the way to go. And when I was at Missouri, I had a really great teacher, and John Corderer was his name. And he said, yeah, I don't know if you want to do sports. You have this knack to be able to come up with stories on just about whatever. And I heard him say that, and I thought, really? You really think that? Because, when you're that young, and I remember them saying, everybody in this room is going to get a job, and you're going to be out there telling stories. And again, I'm thinking, really?
wow.
And it wound up happening. But yes, he kind of steered me away from sports and said, I think you'd be better just kind of doing something else. And not necessarily features, just covering the news. And then it just evolved into features, which was a great thing. And I credit Alan Griggs for that, for sort of seeing something that maybe was there that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was great advice, obviously, at the time, and 33 years later, and a great career at Channel 4. We need to take a break. Our guest today, Terry Bulger, the longtime feature reporter at WSMV, and we'll have more with TB after this as you listen to the Roundtable on WGNS.
Finding that missing shin guard, remembering whether it's a home or away game, getting the right kid to the right playing field on the right day. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with auto owners, insurance doesn't have to be one of them. We work with independent agents who keep insurance simple so you can worry about more important things, like not being that fan.
Oh, come on, ref!
That's simple human sense.
Rayburn Insurance in Smyrna.
Come see me, Rick Hall, at Rayburn Insurance in downtown Smyrna today.
Hey fellas, if you've been feeling tired and grumpy and have noticed a lack of motivation and drive, you may have low T. Low testosterone levels can cause weight gain, loss of muscle mass, and so much more. I recommend Low T Center, which is where I get my levels tested. They make it quick and easy to get your levels checked, and it's only $25. And with their on-site lab, you'll get your results back in about 25 minutes. Most insurance is accepted for treatment. Go to lowtcenter.com now to book your appointment online. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare.
French's Shoes and Boots is the #1 place to shop for boots, shoes, apparel, accessories, and much more. Family owned and operated since 1903, French's is always stocked with the top brands in work and western wear. French's is the best place in the South to get Hey Dude shoes for the whole family with the best selection in town. French's Shoes and Boots, your hometown store for boots, shoes, and more.
Shop at French's, French's Shoes and Boots.
1837 South Church Street in Murfreesboro.
There are some treasures here at Bell Jewelers, up to 50% off, that are waiting to be discovered. Hi, this is Trevor at Bell Jewelers. So if you'd like to make a deal, come by here at Bell Jewelers. Just imagine yourself with a big old ring or a nice bracelet or some nice big earrings. Like my granddad said, nothing sparkles like a Bell Jewelers diamond. Your favorite piece is just waiting to be discovered at Bell Jewelers. And it could be at our 50% off treasure chest. Bell Jewelers, 821 Northwest Broad, across from Toots.
My grandmother and Ms. Adams were best friends. She said, Betty, you need to come to Adams' place. You'd love it.
We're talking with Betty Kirksey.
They go above and beyond of what their job is. I wish Miss Adams was still living so I could tell her, you were right, it is where I should be, and it's very nice.
I'm Terry Deal. Call me for more information about Adams Place, located at 1927 Memorial Boulevard, across from Walmart.
This is Good Neighbor Events with Bart Walker. Brought to you by the law offices of John Day and AmeriCare Pest Control.
This is a paid legal ad.
You've probably heard it a million times. If you're injured, call a lawyer. And you probably haven't because you don't know how much it will cost, how long it will take, or even if you have a case. At the law offices of John Day, we provide a free initial consultation because we understand that folks don't want to pay a lawyer only to find out they don't have a case. If you think we can help, we do so on a contingency basis, which means we only get paid if you do. Seriously injured? Call me, John Day.
WGNS reminds you to shop local. That helps our local economy. Would you like to learn more about local history? Well, come on over to the one-room Ransom Schoolhouse this Saturday morning from 9 until noon. Members of the Rutherford County Historical Society are there, and they'll be talking local history, and all of you will enjoy free donuts and coffee. That's this Saturday, 9 until noon, and the one-room Ransom Schoolhouse is at 717 North Academy Street. And yes, it is free. Well, a brand new month is almost here, and on the first Monday of each month, the Rutherford County Beekeepers Association meet over at the Lane Agri Park. They're in the auditorium of the main building. Again, that's the Rutherford County Beekeepers Association, 7 o'clock on the first Monday of each month. That's almost here. Speaking of things that are almost here, the Rutherford Arts Alliance is having a storytelling workshop. That's on Thursday evening, April 4th, 6 o'clock in the evening at the Technology Engagement Center. Those are WGNS Good Neighbor events.
Rutherford weather.
Mostly sunny skies here this afternoon, a high around 60 degrees. Northwest winds at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, partly cloudy and a low near 35. I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki on News Radio WGNS. Currently, it's 44.
Middle Tennessee Electric organizing Rutherford County's 23rd annual Earth Day celebration Saturday, April 20th, 10 to 2 on the Murfreesboro Square. Check out the Kids Zone, hands-on games and activities, free fun for the whole family. More online at rcearthday.com.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and worldwide at WGNSradio.com.
Welcome back into the Wednesday Roundtable. Chip Walters here with you, and glad to have Terry Bulger, the longtime feature reporter from WSMV News or Channel 4. And Terry, you talked about the time of when you had to be the straight news reporter as opposed to feature writing, and today is an unfortunate anniversary in the mid-state. It was today, one year ago today, that the shooting at the Covenant School happened. Can you remember what was going on, and where were you called in on that story?
I wound up doing stories related to that, of course,
Right.
because it was kind of it's when something like that happens, it's pretty much all hands on deck.
Right.
So you've got to come up with a way to maybe find something that's still relevant, but a little bit different than just the straight hard news angle. They called it like the nuts and bolts
Mhm.
of the story that you're going to definitely tell to people, but maybe find something that's a little bit different. Often I just head that way and see what you could find. I can't remember specifically what I did find, but there's always stories out there that you can tell that might at that point be a little bit uplifting. You're maybe looking for something because boy, that's just a tough story to tell. And for the viewer, I always think, to watch that is difficult as well. So my job in all of those kind of situations was to find something that was just a little bit different, that showed something that might have been positive. I remember going out on stories that would be a fire and people would lose their homes. And, I would just observe mostly. I'd watch people and see. And I remember one story like that. It was a fire and there was a woman and she kind of had tears coming down her eyes, and after a while, I didn't want to bother her, but after a while, I just went up to her without a camera and we just started talking. And she basically was telling me, I'm not going to let this stop me. I've worked so hard my whole life to get a house, and this will not stop me. And I will build again from the ground up, and she was fantastic. And eventually, I asked her if I could talk to her on camera. She said yes. And it was one of my favorite stories of all time because it showed even in the worst moments, you can find people who are so resilient and so willing to go in a different direction and say, I can do this, that I thought at that time that's a story people need to hear.
Yeah.
And it's a great story to be able to tell.
Yeah, human resiliency, a great kind of group of stories. What were your favorite type of stories to tell? Were it those where, or were it was it the funny ones, or what type of story gave you the biggest good feeling inside once you knew that you had gotten it all edited and ready to go on the air?
I think it was always stories that surprised me or surprised the viewer that I didn't expect. I never went out sort of looking for anything. I didn't do a lot of research because I wanted to be surprised too. And the beauty of being from the south side of Chicago and coming to Middle Tennessee was everything surprised me, the littlest things. And I think that's what made me do a nice job because I was fascinated by everything that I saw. And from Southern accents to, guys taking peach seeds and carving them into something was not something you see on the south side of Chicago. So anything that kind of just made me shake my head and smile kind of was the impetus for a good story. So anything like that I could find and then tell to people was what I was excited about. So there were so many like that it just made for who knows what I'm going to find today. And I like that idea of, I never really talked to people before. I talked to them on the phone just enough to kind of get a feel that, okay, they're good talkers. I can get stuff out of them. And they seem like good humans, just good people. And if I ever came across somebody who didn't feel like that, to me, if I got a sort of a bad vibe, I'd say, okay, thank you. Nice to talk to you. And they'd never hear from me again. So it was all about the people that I would do the stories with. They made the stories. They surprised me. And I got lucky a lot too. I got to be honest. they would tell me things that, I would ask a question and they'd suddenly say something. I'd be like, I'm sorry, what was that you just said? And the what was that always turned into a good story, too.
When Alan Griggs hired you at Channel 4, during the interview process, did the name Huell Hauser ever come up? And did he show you any of Huell's happy features from back in the 70s?
I don't think he showed me any, but I do remember the name. And you couldn't work at Channel 4 in the 90s and not know about Huell Hauser. I never met the man, but I know he was a legend at Channel 4, and I was kind of following him. And those were big shoes to fill. And I didn't do a lot of pig stories, but I know he did. And I know he was loved by people. He moved out to California, and I definitely would watch his stories. And he was somebody that I had to kind of convince folks watching that I could fill his shoes.
Well, you're right. You talked about the lost pig story from your days, and
Yes.
and then he had the one about the pig that lived in a house. I think it was named Porky, I think, and he did a follow up, and one of the all time funniest breakups on the news set at Channel 4 was when Huell and Dan, of course, Dan goaded him into telling that the pig had died. And it was just neither one of them could hold it together. But my dad ended up being a little cameo on one of Huell's happy features. I grew up in Columbia, Tennessee, and there was a funeral home that did an annual chitlin supper. And if you're Southern, you know what chitlins are. And so Huell, they got him to come down and cover a chitlin supper, and of course had him on at the time film, not video, eating chitlins and stuff like that. So everybody, and he had the VW bus that had smiley faces all over it. So if you would see that coming through town and all of that, but. He was the first one of those. He was the accidental storyteller, from what I understood, that he was maybe a friend of a friend's son or something that ended up interning at Channel 4 for Irving Waugh or somebody, and turned out after he graduated from UT, ended up with a job, and Huell's Happy Features happened after that. But when you got there. I have to believe that Dan Miller was a huge influence in helping guide you along the path once you got to Nashville, and you were we're at a time of year that I'm sure a lot of people remember when he passed away, and you and Rudy were with him. But what did Dan Miller mean to you as far as a mentor and helping you along the way and helping you get your Southern card?
He was great. There's no question about it. He was my favorite, and became a great friend. And for me to have him as a friend was fun too, because we sort of got along. And it was strange because him being from Augusta, Georgia, and me from Chicago, two certainly diverse, different places. But as far as a mentor, you wanted to impress Dan. You wanted him to say, wow, that was a good story. He always would call me by my last name, Bulger. Hey, Bulger, good story. And I later learned from one of his daughters that if Dan called you by your last name, he liked you. So that was a little bit of a sign. And to just have him give you a positive compliment, there was nothing better, because he knew his stuff. He was a great television broadcaster. And he would say that. He would say, I don't know how much of a journalist I am, but I'm a broadcaster. That's what I do. And he kind of, as far as mentoring, he kind of just let you do your thing. And he knew that he didn't need to step in. He didn't need to say stuff unless it was completely wrong and he didn't like it. But for the most part, he just kind of let you do your thing. He did his thing, and I kind of liked it that way. I think he knew that, okay, I think that guy will be okay as well. But just so fun to work with, funny as could be. Some of the things he'd say for, at the time, a 60-year-old man just made me laugh like crazy. And I could see him on set laughing with Hugh Hauser, and some of that stuff was great. I remember I filled in a couple of times doing sports, and we were doing a hockey game, and I think the Predators were playing the Arizona Coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason during the break, I started saying coyotes, and I couldn't stop myself from saying it. And Dan kept saying to me during the commercial, no, it's coyotes. It's not coyotes. And I said, well, I know that. It's coyotes. And I couldn't say the word coyotes. And finally, after, doing it over and over, I said coyotes. Well, the commercial ends, we come on, and would you believe I said coyotes on TV? And Dan just laughed. He couldn't help himself. And I didn't do it on purpose. I got things stuck in your mind. But Dan would get such a kick out of that. And he'd kind of kid you. And you couldn't get anything past Dan. If you goofed up something, Dan would let you know, but he'd do it in kind of a wry, smiley way.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't a tough guy or anything like that. No, but still, you knew you disappointed him, and you didn't want to disappoint Dan.
But you're right. If you got approval from Dan within the newsroom, and here, he's talking to me as a 21-year-old intern or whatever, but. It's almost like you hear these comedians that were on the Tonight Show, and if they got the call over to sit with Johnny Carson, that was kind of our local feeling. If Dan talked to you and spent time joking around with you around the AP wire machine or whatever, that seemed to me to be that kind of same feeling.
Absolutely, and just. The thing about him, too, was sometimes you think about an anchor and the anchor just reads the teleprompter and that's it. Dan went over every story in the newscast with a fine-tooth comb. He would look at everything, and he would kindly go up to the reporter if there was something that he just thought was maybe not correct grammar, or there was just something wrong with it. He would say, is this really what you want to say here? And it would turn out that Dan was always right, because he kind of just knew what worked for television, and he had that extra sense that would always improve people's stories. So he wouldn't do it a lot, but when he saw something that just didn't seem right, he'd let you know, again, in the nicest way. And I liked that because it showed that he was doing more than just reading what was on the teleprompter. He was making the show better. And sometimes you don't get that all the time from the person reading what's going on in the news. They might be just too busy to look at everything, but he looked at everything before it went on the air, almost like an executive editor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'd ever call himself that. Again, he called himself a broadcaster, which, geez, he clearly was.
Yeah, no question about that. And he was certainly a star for sure when it came to television news in the Middle Tennessee area. Terry Bulger is our guest today on the Roundtable. We're going to take a quick break and be back for our final segment as this hour whizzes by on the Wednesday Roundtable here on WGNS.
When the unexpected happens, fire, water, or storm damage, Farrah Construction can help. Farrah Construction is also there to help when a car slams through the wall, and that seems to happen more often these days. I'm Ron Hall. Let our family at Farrah Construction help you Call Farrah Construction and we'll board up, put down tarps, secure your home or business until the insurance coverage is approved. I'm Ron Hall. Shop local. Let our family business help you. Farrah Construction Company.
As a leader in environmental services, sustainability is deeply integrated into our business model. At Middle Point Landfill, we are environmentalists at heart. This is Mike Klassen with Middle Point Landfill. We use cutting-edge technology in combination with our deep experience in recycling and waste services to protect our environment and our neighbors. That's our job, and that's our promise. We invite you to learn more about us at middlepointlandfill.com. For Public Services, we are sustainability in action.
This is Kim Dunaway from Sunshine Nutrition Center. You hear me on Monday mornings at 7:20 talking about how to lead a healthier lifestyle. We carry supplements, personal care, and grocery items at both our Murfreesboro and Smyrna locations, family owned and operated since 1989.
Life is best when lived in motion, and Bud's Tire Pros will help keep you and your ride in motion and on the road while ensuring you're ready for any adventure that life throws your way. March 14th through April 2nd, get up to $80 via a Visa reward card, or you can get a Visa virtual prepaid card with the purchase of 4 new Michelin passenger or light truck tires. With Bud's Tire Pros by your side, you can continue to explore the unfamiliar.
Stop by and see us at Bud's Tire Pros today. See store for details. Offer ends April 2nd, 2024. Void where prohibited.
Hi, this is Bob Cornell, pastor of Covenant Church right here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The answer that you've been looking for is found in Jesus and what he accomplished at the cross. You see, Jesus changes lives from the inside out. We would love for you to join us at Covenant Church, located at 1124 Brinkley Ave right here in Murfreesboro. We have services Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. and Tuesdays at 7 p.m. You can learn more about us at our Cornell Ministries YouTube channel. We want you to grow in Christ at Covenant Church.
We're visiting with Jennifer Sanchez, manager of Steered Straight 2 Furniture and Thrift at 1007 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
You're not just walking into just a big warehouse, you're walking into rooms. We've got a media room, we've got a boutique room, we've got a vintage room, a furniture area, kitchen, all that.
Steered Straight 2 Furniture and Thrift.
Every day you go in there, I promise you it's changing.
Steered Straight 2 Furniture and Thrift, 1007 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Online at steeredstraightthriftstore.org.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, and worldwide at WGNSradio.com.
Welcome back into the Wednesday Roundtable. Terry Bulger is our guest today, the longtime feature reporter for Channel 4 in Nashville. Next Wednesday, we're going to do an all Elvis hour. Harold Smith is going to be back here and talk about the 5 shows that Elvis had at Murphy Center here at MTSU. And we had Harold talking about just all the concerts. We're going to get down to the low gravy on Elvis and maybe have a few surprise drop-ins on that one as well. But that'll be next Wednesday as we celebrate the 50th anniversary, believe it or not, of the first Elvis show at Murphy Center. Terry Bulger's here, and Terry, what amazes me, talking about those the days back in the day when you first got to Channel 4 is to now, is the difference in the newsroom and the difference in the news cycle that was then and what is now. I don't think people understand the energy that was in a newsroom back in the day, because now you walk in and it's all really quiet. Back in the day you had, the wire machines were, ching, 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 ching. They were, everything was coming out. The big printers where you were printing scripts had stuff going on. You had everybody who had to go in the edit rooms to edit tape and all that. There was just a lot going on, and it was something that you looked forward to walking into every day.
I think headphones changed all of that,
You're right.
We all wear headphones. Everybody would wear headphones in these days, and you never heard anything. You're right. You'd walk into a newsroom in 2023, and geez, it would be quiet as could be.
Yeah, like going to the library.
As opposed to that loud sound of people working, which I preferred, honestly. It felt like a newsroom. geez, everything has changed. Some for the better. I mean, I think back in the early 90s, people smoked in the newsroom.
Yes.
And, that eventually got banned. Yeah, it's definitely changed. Computers,
Yep.
when computers came in, when I started, there were no computers. Computers didn't exist. Um, so that changed everything as well. And, you just hit a button and everything goes to the printer. Back in the, those early days, it was all, I remember scripts on carbon. What were you'd rip the scripts? There'd be
yeah.
5 copies
Yeah,
from typewriters.
Yeah, and in the sports office when I was working with Rudy and those guys, I mean, you had a whole box of those script papers, which were either 5 or 7 copies deep in a carbon pack.
Yep.
And
Right.
and it was a manual typewriters in there. So people ask me now why, they see me type and I'm like banging away. Well, you had to type hard to get, every time that that letter slammed in, to get it through 5 different levels, and Lord knows you didn't want to be I forgot who the last person was that got the back copy, but you could a lot of times just barely read what was on the last piece of carbon paper there.
Right, because every copy would go to somebody, and they were important. So one copy would go to the anchors that they were going to read what you typed. One copy would go to the director, the person punching all the buttons to make sure that the news came on the way it was supposed to. One copy would go to the teleprompter.
And you wanted that to be a good copy. You wanted that to be a really good copy.
Yes, so that the anchors could read it. And if they couldn't read it, you'd probably hear a little something from them afterwards to say, I couldn't even read what I was supposed to read on the teleprompter. How do you expect it to be any good? So, yeah, it was definitely primitive. But at the time, we didn't know any better.
Oh, that's right.
That's what we did.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the news cycle, I mean, back in the day, once the 10 o'clock news was over, you had one reporter basically that worked overnight most of the time, and now everything is on, is such a 24-hour news cycle. And to me, the disappointing part of news today is the importance that has been placed on being first instead of being right. And that is, everybody wants a scoop. Everybody's always wanted to scoop and break the story. But now sometimes it seems like accuracy gets smudged a little bit in favor of being first and to get it out on Twitter first or whatever. And you were kind of insulated from that a little bit because of what you did.
Correct. And there was time back then. You had more time to produce and put a good story on the air. When I first got there, we had one newscast, 6 o'clock. We did an hour of news at 6 o'clock. Well, today the news starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you just don't have time to, you go in, you're in the morning meeting. You don't get out of that till maybe 10:30. And all of a sudden, your story's on at 3 o'clock for some people. Fortunately, mine wasn't that quick, but you just don't have time to put together something that you're necessarily really proud of. And when it's a story about like hard news where something happened, well, okay, you can kind of do that. But something that's more, I don't know, nuanced, if that's the word, it's just hard to do because I don't think anything happens that's great when you don't have much time to put it all together. And you can apply that to every field out there. I don't want a surgeon operating on me if he's only got like 2 hours to do that. He needs as much time as it takes to make everything right. And it kind of works the same way for when you're reporting on a television story. The more time you have, the more time you have to make it better. And typically we'd go right up to the wire, right up to the end of, when they needed the story. to polish it and make it great. So time has a lot to do with what you see on TV today with what you said, that 24-hour news cycle. We need it now, now, now. And sometimes now and quality don't equate.
Yeah, and also the aspect of social media has allowed anybody with a device to put anything out there, relatively unchecked, and so there's so much good that social media has, but there's also a downside to it, and that has, I think if you talk to college age individuals and 20 some odd year olds, that their first stop for news is on the social media channels.
Right. I always say check your sources.
Yeah.
Find out who this is coming from, because it could be, as the stereotype is, the 21-year-old in the basement telling you what happened when he has no clue. And typically, there are sources out there that are a little bit more inclined to find out if it's really what happened.
Yeah.
So social media probably not necessarily the go-to for what happened today.
Exactly. And one of my favorite social media accounts that I do follow is AP. So, at least I know where that's coming from. But
right.
Do you remember, what was your first story after you came on at Channel 4? Do you happen to remember what your first feature story was about?
I do. In fact, it was close to Murfreesboro. It was Reedyville.
Ah.
And don't say Readyville, right?
That's correct.
Even though it's spelled Readyville. It was Reedyville, and it was a story about an old mill, which I think is still there as a restaurant, maybe?
Well, it was damaged in a tornado, and
okay.
Reedyville Mill, so that was your first story, Reedyville Mill.
That was my first story.
Wow.
Yes, I went to the Reedyville Mill, and somehow, some way, came up with what I thought was a good story, and it turned into a really nice story. And I remember my photographer that I worked with said to me as we were going there, he said, "This isn't a story. There's nothing to do here." Well, at 6 o'clock when it aired, he said, "Hey, that was a pretty good story." And so, it's kind of like, it may not look like a lot on the surface, but you start walking around and talking to people who knew about it, and suddenly it was a nice little story. So that was my first and one of my favorites, and I had to learn that it's Reedyville, not Readyville, and I did say Reedyville on the air, and I'm mildly proud of that.
You should be very proud of that. Well, and if you really want to get Rutherford County, it's Reedyville. And it's kind of, Reedyville.
Yeah.
And so there's that.
Just like Chebbville.
Chebbville, yeah. That's right. Everybody has a legacy, and 33 years at Channel 4, and when it's and now that time has come and gone, how do you want to be remembered by viewers in the mid-state?
I just want, and I've heard a lot from people since I've left, and great comments, great compliments, just as a guy who told stories that made people maybe laugh, maybe just say, wow, that was good. No more than that. Somebody who just gave something a little bit different to the newscast that people could enjoy. I'm happy with that. I always say, being there for 33 years, I was never promoted in the sense of I'd never became an anchor or a general manager or a news director, and that was fine with me. I didn't want to be promoted. I liked what I was doing, and I think people liked that too because it was so different. And some people actually would tell me that they look forward to that part of the news just to get a break from all the stuff that was tough to handle. The regular daily news can be tough to handle.
Yep.
So for me to come along with something a little bit lighter, but true and real and reflected all the great stuff in Tennessee and Middle Tennessee. You know, that was the best part because I'm not making this stuff up. It's happening, and it's great happening right next to you. That's what made it great.
That could be a regular feature on a newscast. Hey, I'm not making this stuff up. That could be the title of it. So what now that what do you do to entertain yourself these days?
Well, I do play the guitar. I do like that. That's fun for me. I'm not necessarily any good at it, but I come up with little songs and stuff that entertain me. I write funny little poems that entertain me as well for people. Otherwise, I'm always looking for things to do. Still am. I say I'm not really retired. I'm going to find something that keeps me busy, probably outside television, just something different. I continue to say that I've never had a real job, which is true. I've never worked at like a desk or, not that I want one now, but I'm looking for something else to do. Who knows? I'm wide open. So, hey, I'll throw my email out if somebody's got an idea for me. Bulger 1985 at gmail.com.
That's right. And
there's something out there, let me know.
Yeah, Bulger 1985. And the 1985 is because you are from Chicago, and the 1985 Chicago Bears were Super Bowl champs, correct?
You better believe it, and I'm still a big Bears fan.
There you go.
Sorry, but even when they play the Titans.
Hey, totally understood. Terry, thanks so much for taking time today. It has been a nice trip down memory lane, and you've got a lot of folks out there who love you and enjoyed your work for so many years. We appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you. And honestly, Chip Walters is a name that people should be familiar with as well, and I know they are, because your career and your life has been all about broadcasting. And I'm sure that was something that you wanted to do from the time you were a little kid, and you made it happen. So you're throwing that word legacy around. Well, that applies to you as well.
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. Terry, thanks so much. And we got to get out of here, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Terry Bulger has been our guest today. If you missed any of it, you can go back and check out the podcast section of WGNSradio.com. Wraps up this Wednesday edition of the Roundtable. Brian Barrett coming up next with Rutherford Issues right here on the Big G